stop me. I'd be more than happy to answer them. It's involved with the collector report you have in front of you. So we're going to go over it, again, not in depth, but we're going to identify everything that's in it. All right, I'm going to ask you to please go to page 3. This is the introduction talking about the City of East Cleveland, why the report was put together at the request of the commission. Gives a little bit of background of the City of East Cleveland when it was a fiscal emergency put in 1988 and came out in 2006. They were in there for about 17 years. Then in January of 2012, the auditor placed the city into fiscal caution. And because there was no good recovery plan that addressed the deficits, the city was placed in fiscal watch in May of 2012. And again, because the plan didn't address the deficits, placed in emergency in October of 2012. The next area is current conditions. And again, the city has lost revenue, just lost a considerable amount of revenue from various sources, and has attempted to reduce expenditures, but the expenditure reductions aren't keeping up with the loss in revenue. So that's where we are right now. And as in any city, the lion's share is salaries and benefits. So it's people. So again, the revenues this year so far coming in according to the amended certificate, and appropriations are so far according to what council passed. But we know we think healthcare is going to go up, school is going to change, and there's a structural imbalance. We're just not bringing in enough revenue to take care of the services that the city currently provides. On to page 4. Also in this is a forecast, and in the forecast as well as the current appropriations, we had July 9th payables that were $3.4 million. The payables were not in the forecast, and they're not in the appropriations, but we know it's out there. There will be some scenarios, though, that do bring those payables into play, and we're just going to show kind of where the city sits right now. As we said in our report, the city's able to meet its payroll, it's able to meet its benefits. So far, we're current on health care. Any extra money goes to pay health care, or any emergency bills. I mean, they're keeping current with their trash collection. They're trying to keep current with utilities. We're making some payment plans, but again, we're not bringing in enough money. We're not bringing the money we need at the city. Also in the report are a few different capital asset listings. It's all in Appendix A. The report says Appendix B, but again, like Eunice said, we had some changes last minute on Friday. Appendix A, we'll go to it in detail, but the first one shows you what capital assets the city has. That's on page A1. That comes from the most recent audit as of December 31st of 2012. And as you can see from that listing, when we get there, the assets are 87% depreciated. So all the cities using them, they are aging. And a lot of money is going to be needed for the city to come through to get their things up to the standards that they want them to be. A2 and all the way up to A50 is a listing off of the city's books. That, actually I shouldn't say books, off their system, that has put in all the assets that the city owns. And that's at historical cost. Because when you prepare financial statements, you use actual historical cost. It's not appraised value. It doesn't include inflation or anything. So that goes on for several pages. And again, we'll touch them in depth in a little bit. A51, because it hasn't been updated since 2012, the Auditor of State contracted with an outside agency to get a list of the city's land and buildings. So on A51 is a list of all the land and buildings that's owned by the City of East Cleveland. Those amounts were confirmed with the county auditor. Okay? And in that listing, you'll see 5 that are bold.
Sure. I'm losing.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna go into detail here.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
5 that are in bold. And those 5, we put next to it what that asset is. And of the 12.3 million, 10 million of it is being used by the city now. So there's like $2 million out there of other land and buildings. But again, you don't know if you can sell it for that. Okay? And then finally, A55 is another schedule that we met with the city administration, and they identify different capital needs of the city. Fire department needs, police department needs, street, water, sewer lines. Kind of tried to put together a listing so that it would bring it to everyone's attention to the needs of the city of East Cleveland. So that, in a nutshell, is what's in this report. We also have some narratives on annexation, merger, and bankruptcy. I'm not going to address that. I'm not an expert by any means, but our legal counsel is here to address that. But first of all, we're going to hit you with the numbers and then let them discuss the other parts. Let's go to page 10, please. Page 10 through page 19 is a 5-year forecast. And in that 5-year forecast that starts on page 10, says, okay, what is the city bringing in revenues currently? What are its staffing levels currently? Okay? So I'm going to just kind of hit the larger ones. Stop me if you want me to stop. Main sources of income for the city is taxes. That's lion's share is property and income tax. The city has been seeing a steady decrease in the amount it receives in property taxes. Again, that's in dual part. The valuation from the county's going down and population is leaving the city, or delinquencies. So there's going to be a revaluation in 2015 of the county and a reappraisal in 2018. What has historically happened is it's gone down a little bit the next year after those reappraisals or revals. So a small decrease was built in 2016 and 2019. Income tax is by far the largest, and the city has seen a slow, steady decrease in income tax over the last 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
How do you account for the incredible decrease from the actual 2014 to forecasted in 2015? Property taxes.
Let me look at the assumptions, Helen. Is it just,
What the county certified.
the 2014 is the actual amount that we got. 2015, when we submit the amended certificate or the certificate of estimated resources to the county, they put that tax number in. Strictly comes from Cuyahoga County. That and the homestead rollback. But I think it's been coming in true to form.
We go from a $50,000 decrease down to almost a $140,000 decrease.
Yes. And that was certified by Cuyahoga County.
It is the way. Because I know there's sometimes where there's a difference of opinion. The county may estimate delinquencies at a higher rate than they're actually realizing. But
It's true so far for East Cleveland. We're straight right on the money as far as taxes. Intergovernmental, we've seen a decrease in intergovernmental revenue. The first line item, local government, was certified by Cuyahoga County for 2015. So based on what we've seen in the governor's budget so far, the assumption was made to maintain that. We don't know whether it's going to go up or down, but what we know right now, it is what it is based on the budget. Homestead rollback is driven by taxes. If taxes are going down, your homestead rollback goes down. So there's a direct correlation between those. The safe route and resource officer, you see a large change between 14 and 15. Before 2015, that was in its own fund. And we just said, you know what, it doesn't need to be in its own fund. We're going to put it in the general fund. The school district pays for resource officers up at the school district. They pay the city. So that's the revenue that the city is getting. And that's been coming in. All these revenues are pretty much on track. Estate tax is gone. We know that. Charges for services. You're going to see a small incremental increase in the refuse fee. Council passed an ordinance to increase it a small amount each year. And back, you can see in 2014, there was an aggressive push to collect delinquents, and that's what the city did, working with the collection people down at the city of Cleveland. So we got a good chunk of cash. $420,000 was forecast this year, and it's coming in pretty close. So a small increase is based on that increase in collection fee.
And why did we stop the aggressive collection?
I think they still are, Helen, but I think that we just got a bunch of it. I mean, they hit them hard in 14, and I'm sure they're still going at it. I mean, Tisha went and visited them, I think.
I think so. I think they are always trying to get as many delinquents as possible.
Other street lighting, we're kind of keeping that consistent. It's coming in as the 2015 levels. There's an assessment fee for street lights. Fines and forfeitures are for the most part from the courts. So we're basing it on collections that we've received this year. Forecasting it out to remain about the same. And then other revenue, there's the traffic camera revenue. That's the second line item. You can see it was larger, and then in 14 we were paying back that advance. We didn't start getting monies in 14. 15 so far, $130,000. But again, we're going to need to examine that and see how much of it was for 15 bills. A large one is, we had a few one-time shots, and we'll talk about those. In 2014, we had the workers' comp rebate, the sale of Noble Road, the sale of the cell tower lease, and then we have the transfer station lease that we have recurring. But those three items together are one-time sources. In 2015, at the very bottom, there's a transfer in of $1.2 million or so. That comes from the other funds that the city closed, dormant, not using anymore. Basically said, hey, let's take those unused funds, put it in the general fund. We can get it to balance our budget for 2015, and that's what the city is doing. And that's why that's a one-time shot again. And then from page 12, all the way through to page 19, all the different departments in the budget that council appropriates for. 13 and 14, of course, are actual. 15 are those appropriations that council passed. You can kind of see all the different departments. Page 18 and 19. The most important row on this page is the increase, decrease in cash. Again, this is based on current staffing the city has, current services the city is trying to provide to its constituents. In 2015, you're bringing in more than you're spending, and that's very simply those transfers. We had $1.2 million in transfers. It's a one-time hit. It's not going to be there anymore. Once those funds are moved, they're moved. And then beginning in 2016 and on, in order to keep the staffing levels and police and fire and everything that the city has, there's going to be deficit spending, and that deficit is going to grow every year. And that's what this is showing you. It goes from $3 million deficit to $5 million, almost $5.7 million in 2019. Now remember I talked about those payables. Appropriations didn't address the payables, but we wanted to bring this to the commission's attention. if you add in those payables, that's where your are for your balance, your fund balance.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
For the 2015 expenditures, the total expenditures, it right now shows it at almost the appropriation. But in our previous sheets, it shows that the police department, the fire department,
A little over, yeah.
are you expecting that spending will decrease as the year
We're
goes?
hoping that it does decrease, but we're going to have to, it's halfway through the year. We're going to meet with the administration, we're going to meet with, sit down with Jack and just say, Jack, what do you think? This is where we are at the end of June. We already know that healthcare is almost to the level of appropriations that have been put in place. And they're going to have to go back to council and get an increase in healthcare. So I'm thinking, yeah, no, they will be up there. Because when people leave too in East Cleveland, there's large severance packages. So even though, you're attempting to reduce staff, these severance packages are quite large. And that affects your general fund. So it's, it takes a while to catch up from that. And you get the loss in revenue, and you're trying to, reduce staff, but you can't keep up with it. And so that's what this is kind of showing. In answer to your question, that probably will go up.
Do we have where is the amount of payables?
Payables in about the middle of page 18 and 19.
And those are what we had to add.
Those are what we had to add.
Okay.
And they were as of July 9th when we started putting this together. It went down a little. Yep, that's a good thing.
If I could just point out, pictures say a lot. The graph on page 18, I get the sense in all of the meetings I've sat here on here is that the idea of this deficit doesn't really click for people. We just, we've always had deficits, we just keep on spending and everything's okay. Well, if I look at that graph, not even counting in the payables that are not involved here, I see the revenues constantly below the expenditures. And to me, that says cash. And regardless of how far you go out, if you're even going to get that far out, we've got negatives going out and they're increasing. But what we don't see, which is to me even more important, is the cash. Because eventually there will be no cash and there will be no spending.
We have, when I talked to Jack the other day, before we went to, into a meeting, he said that we had $560-some thousand in cash, but you had $3-point-some million in deficit. So how far are we down on that cash from the other day when we talked about the $3 million?
I don't know what the current cash balance is at the city right now. I've seen the July reconciliation. It hasn't clicked in my head what that is. I don't remember.
I know that Jack tries to keep enough in there to make payroll and pension. And then any extra he uses to pay health care. So I think there were 3 payrolls in August. So he probably was holding for that. I don't know what day he met with them.
I think it was Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, we had a payroll bid, and that's about $200,000 with the pension payments.
So we would be down, so we're still going up and down because of I can understand that because of the payroll situation. But we are still meeting payroll.
Yes, you are.
And as long as we have cash, my understanding, and I always say, that we're not broke.
Okay.
But we spent it.
So, this is our forecast, and then from pages 20 through page 24 are the assumptions that I just kind of told you as we went along, but you can read them at your leisure. It's kind of a little bit of detail on what makes up all the different revenues and all the different expenditures. Okay, page 26 starts. We have in this report 8 different scenarios, and each of them has its own set of assumptions. Tisha's going to talk about those. Page 26 summarizes them for you, and we just looked at the general fund. Okay? Go ahead, Misty.
Okay. If you would like to turn to page 28, we'll go over the first scenario. I'll go through the first one in detail. The remaining 7, I'll just hit the highlights as to what changed from one scenario to another. But if you have any questions along the way, please stop me and I'll go into as much detail as you would like. The first one on page 28, the assumption that we looked at is if the city issued local government notes for the amount to pay the delinquent payables as well as bond counsel costs associated with them. We did the payable search as of July 9th, and that comes to about $3,398,000. The estimated bond counsel cost to be $100,000 of that. So the city would borrow a total of just under $3.5 million. All the scenarios assume the existing forecast. You'll see the very first line, the existing revenues of the $13,527,000 in 2013 actual will actually tie to the forecast that Nita went over on pages 10 through 19. And same for the expenditures. So we always started with that forecast as if nothing changed, and then we applied the different criteria depending on the scenarios. So as I said, scenario 1, the city would only borrow enough to pay the delinquent payables and bond counsel costs. With that, the city would then have to start repaying that local government note in 2016. And we estimated a 4.31% interest rate on the note. And the way we did that was we, for lack of a better word, Googled a short-term loan for 8 years, and that came up to be the industry average at that time. So with that 4.31%, and assuming the city would take the full 8-year payback option, you can see in 2016, the city would need to pay back almost $500,000 between principal and interest. You guys see the 374 and the 146? Okay. With the reduction in revenue of $500,000, the assumption also is the city would need to remain in compliance with their recovery plan and not deficit spend as they were in the forecast that Nita pointed out. So if you look at the decrease in cash in 2016, you'll see it's a positive $45,919. In order to stay within that estimated revenue, the city would need to reduce 17 employees with an average salary and benefits of $64,830 in order to just stay within those revenues. With the reduction of employees, that also reduces the health care contribution by the employee. So that's what the top $20,825 is. Since the city doesn't have the employee, they don't get that revenue either. So it's a two-sided.
And how many employees do we have currently?
117 in the general fund. That includes the court, the mayor, council,
Police and fire.
police, fire, all of that, yes. And you can see going throughout the forecast in 2016, this city would need to reduce 17 employees. In 2017, an additional 2 employees for a total of 19. And then in 2019, a total of 25 employees would need to have been laid off. And you can see my little graph, that's about 21% of the general fund employees at this time.